This is a presentation of the Keshe Foundation TV Spaceship Institute, and I want to welcome all the knowledge seekers from around the world. Obviously, we're in North America, and that includes Canada, the US, and Mexico. And however, this is the Keshe Foundation North American Corona team meeting, and it's a beautiful Sunday afternoon. We're talking about plasma science. With the session is advanced knowing, and the subject today is super granular layer. And my name is Alexander. I'm from Canada. It is January the 16th, 2022. And this is a presentation of the Keshe Foundation North America Plasma Education Series. And we are at the tail end of a series of classes. And we're trying to navigate through lots of problems. We even have a new country, the United States of Emergency, that has been inundated with many problems. And the good news is there is light at the end of the tunnel. And I might be having some internet trouble from time to time, so please excuse.
We keep an eye on it.
Let's get into it. So when we say advanced knowing, please understand this is all part of the basic teaching. And as such, we've broken it down into teaching, understanding, and knowing. And this is the second to last class in this series. We started over a year ago with the Brazilian community, and you can see how far they've advanced. It's phenomenal work that they're doing, and you can witness that every Friday night, especially with the quality that has been increasing unbelievably, and the effort and the knowledge and the payoff that's come from all the work that all the knowledge seekers have been doing. And we definitely want to extend that right around the world, but we don't want to exclude any of the other groups that are really pushing very hard. And not the least of which is the Iranian and the Chinese groups, which are massive in terms of numbers, and they really dwarf the numbers over here. But we're not trying to make any commentary. We're trying to teach. And today's subject is a super granular layer. And maybe we'll try and see what that is all about. So what I want to do is welcome you all to the Plasmagen Travel Agency. As you know, we were all born to Earth. Many of us don't know how this happened, and some of us really don't care to know how. But we were born for a reason. Many of us don't know why, and some of us don't care to know why. And some of us want to travel to Mars, and they don't know how, and they don't know why, and they don't care to know why, because we were not born to Mars, right? And this is extending to the problem. Why do we want to go to Mars when we're having problems here on Earth? And so this leads us into the state of ignorance. Now, ignorant just means that you're unaware. But if you're unaware, as in unwilling, in other words, you are aware but unwilling, that's being ignorant. And so if we're trying to have the audacity to terraform Mars when we can't terraform Earth, that's ignorant. And so we're all trying to cross this bridge, but some of us can't, or we don't know how to cross the bridge. It's the few who don't want to cross the bridge, and they are living in a state of corruption. And so for the rest of us, it's really time to get dirty. And when we look at the numbers and we find out the tragedies that we have on this planet, and cancer is still leading 164,000 to 30. But this is not a competition. We're on our way through uncharted skies, And the problem for that is that today in this class, I'm the leader. And, but as a teacher, I want to become a student. And so there are many things that we want to talk about. Some things you can't hear what I'm saying. And then sometimes you say, well, seeing is believing. Well, we're trying to show, but you're still not believing. So I don't get it. So we really have to sort things out. The problem, of course, is that we're going to have some rough seas ahead. That's not a forecast. That's just the way the business is right now. Because as most of us, we're trying to tune into the energies of the universe and turn on our souls to the power that we have. But in order to do that, we have to drop out of our physicality. And how do we do that when, you know, we're trying to figure out what is going to be the next big step? So the next big step, as you know, is that the Keshe Foundation is a spaceship institute. It's not an advertising specialty agency. So we are planning to launch to the moon on June 6, 2022, and the countdown has begun. And so it's T-minus 140 days, and the clock is ticking. And so all of us here, we want to be soul travelers. Well, we are soul travelers. And the thing is that we don't want to carry the baggage that's on this planet. What we want to do is to realize the reason that we were born and to fulfill the reason through being universal functionaries. And so let's proceed to the departure lounge because flight 2022 is now boarding. And I hope you all have a nice trip today, suckers. We all want to know how the universe is created. Well, we should anyway. But as described in the book number 1 from Marin Tapakoli-Keshe, the universal creation of matters is the universal order of the creation of matters. So order is not chaos. And it's quite a contradictory term when you look at our society today. And all of this exists from energy in motion. And because energy is always in motion, therefore it has a charge. So the energy is always positive, but we want to know which way it's going and how strong the fields are. And then we find that here we have 2 plasma fields connected with an infinity loop. And so how does the energy move from one place to another? So we know that it does because in the cups of life, and we need to emphasize the cups of life because they're not the cups of pandemic. So once this pandemic is over, the cups of life have a very, very important purpose. So all of us need to really learn how to do this because we have only begun to scratch the surface in terms of the technology and what we're capable of doing. So we know that the 1 cup, we take some physical matter, like in a zinc plate and a copper coil, and a nano-coated copper coil, and we're able to create a magnetic field and a gravitational field. And we can create other cups, and they have differences where 1 cup is emotional and 1 cup is physical. And if we are using this for our health purposes, let's keep these batches at least 1 meter apart when we're making these cups. But after a few days, we can put them together and start the building of the cups of man. And of course, the cups of man involve more cups because we also have the cup of soul, the cup of inertia, and the cup of earth. And all of them work together where they all have a magnetical gravitational field. And in the center, they have a soul. And the point is, each cup has this individually, and all the cups together have it collectively. Because in the plasma science, this is all based on magnetical field forces. And these magnetical field forces involve attraction and repulsion. And so it's a two-way street, you see. So if we have a balance between the magnetical and the gravitational field forces, we call that a maggrav. And if we add to that, then that becomes gravitational because we absorb. But if we subtract from that, then that becomes an emission. And so that becomes magnetical. But we have unfortunate terms here. We say that the creation is addition and the subtraction is decay. But it isn't really. It is creation in another direction. And we know that because the natural decay is a reduction in energy being transferred into the physical state. And we are all enjoying today in our physical state. So that's not really decay. And this is a relationship that we have between the magnetical and gravitational fields. So we call that a maggrav. And when it's in balance, then it's a maggrav. But if it is in total balance, well, then it's invisible. So scientifically speaking, because energy is always in motion, so science is preoccupied with the conservation of energy. But spiritually speaking, we're trying to figure out where does the spirit come in? And we find that the spirit is the motor of the soul. So the science of science and the science of spirituality are missing a few things, and the plasma science adds to this knowledge. So as we put the three books together, The Universal Order of Creation of Matter, The Structure of Light, and The Origin of the Universe. Well, The Origin of the Universe is book number 3, but maybe it should be book number 1. So, but it really doesn't matter because, what we're really thinking about is it backwards or is it upside down? Well, we all like to be firmly planted, and that's why they call it terra firma. So, but when the terra is not so firma, how can you be firmly planted? And are you backwards or are you upside down? Well, that all depends on your point of view. So we have two domains, the physical domain and the plasmatic domain. And the difference is that in the physical domain, you can touch it and see it. In the plasmatic domain, you can't touch it and you can't see it. And somehow we can go from one domain to another. And somehow we can sense this. But this sensation that we have, which domain is that in? The sensation. Is it a physical sensation or is it a plasmatic sensation? So that all depends on which is your dominant matter state and what is the common denominator that you're focusing on. So the physicality becomes a field focusing event. And the plasma state kind of gets to be a little bit blurry. When we look at the nanosphere state, we find that, well, when we're looking at the star formation, in the nanostate, it doesn't matter which side is up. What matters is the relationship between the plasma fields. And so whether it's right side up or upside down, there is a connection. But there's nothing connecting. So there's a gap in between. So there's nothing there, right? So where's the connection there? So that gap, which is invisible, is a plasmatic connection. And the strength of the nanocoding is obviously more than just physical, although it is a physical representation. So we're really trying to clarify everything more, because this is an advanced knowing. And so when we look at the stacker unit, we find that, well, physically, each of the 5 cups has a construction, and each of the 5 cups has a relationship. And when we stack them together, and yeah, they all interact together, but there is a gap in between. And we find that this is quite representative of the way we are feeding ourselves. And so the higher always feeds the lower, right? So, but it feeds all of the lower. And so we find that the stacker unit is the giver, and the giver is positive. So the taker is negative. Wait a second. If the giver is positive inside to the taker on the outside, so it goes from the positive to the negative. But if the negative is magnetical and the magnetical is negative, then negative is the giver. And so this has been quite a discussion of confusion, because we're not understanding the difference between the physical science and the plasma science. So in the plasma science, the magnetical is the giver. But what does it give to? So if the gravitational is the taker, where does it take from? And what is the connector? So when we look at the periodic table of elements, we find that the carbon is the connector. And so what we find is the basic components of the amino acid and the basic salt environment, and the active plates in the cups may be copper, maybe zinc, maybe iron. And then we find that we have phosphorus as being an important energy constituent. And from that, well, we can make elements, but we can also make fatty acid, which comes from the amino acid. And when we look at it and we say carbon is the connector, well, which side is up? And how do we know? And it's kind of funny, really, isn't it? Because H upside down is H. And in fact, C upside down is C. So we really can't tell. But being carbon-based means being organic. So maybe when we start to link up, if we can see that opposite poles attract. So if opposite poles attract, then they can link up. But if the same poles repel, then there would be a gap. What keeps those things together? What attracts and what connects the various components? So this becomes the question. And so when you're looking at the plasma state, it really doesn't matter which way is up. What matters is the direction of flow and the strength of flow. And what exactly is it flowing? But what we're looking at here is the H on top is a hydrogen and the H on the bottom is a hydrogen. And so there is a balance. But the hydrogen is negative and the carbon is gravitational. So it is positive. So we have a balance from top to the bottom. And it is equal. And if it is equal, that means it has no charge. That means it's invisible. Which kind of explains why when you're looking at an X-ray, the only thing that you can see is the bone structure. The rest of it you can't see. But let's face it, we have bodies. And I don't care if you're from Missouri or where you're from, you could see a body. So, but on an X-ray, a lot of the stuff is invisible. Isn't that interesting? And then when you look at from the left or from the right, well, we don't know what's going on there. So nothing's going on, right? But nothing is nothing, always something. And therefore, when we have a MAGRAV condition, which is a balance between the magnetical and the gravitational field forces of attraction and repulsion. So gravitationally speaking, we are converging energy. We're drawing towards it. And when we're magnetical, we are diverging energy. We are giving it away. But there's no way to give. You give to another gravitational field, you see. So that's what makes the universe interdependent. But you are independent. You are a variable. And so your independence is interdependent with the universe. And there's some kind of crossover point we discussed last week, this emotional transformation. So we're going to carry on from there. And so we introduced some new terminology, and we really want to get this understood. So there's basically three fields, X, Y, and Z, three dimensions. Rotation is transmission, polarity is transition, and field strength is transportation. And once we have this plasma field, then that plasma sits in the core and it tries to position itself with other fields, with other plasmas, with other energies in the core. And so when you have two plasmas interacting, that creates a dynamic interaction. And so we have 1 + 1 is more than 2. And this is how energy is always in motion. And it is because of this that we can go through the various dimensions. So on this planet, as we go through these various dimensions, that's our range. And we can stay in the range on this planet and transcend the various energy levels. We are in emotional ranges also, simultaneously. And we can transcend through various dimensions that way as well. And now we know that we also have soul ranges. And these soul ranges go through different dimensions. And in fact, they go through different geometries. And so this is how energy is in motion. And that's the whole purpose of these plasma classes, is for us to understand how things cross over. So, you know, we are all familiar with the rotating planet in the North and South Pole, okay? But these are perpendicular crossover points. And so if we want to see what makes the Earth round, we introduced pi. And pi is a symbol that represents 3 and a bit. So in other words, at least 3 pi's and a bit is the equivalency of the diameter to the the perimeter of a circle. So the diameter times pi is equal to the perimeter of the circle. But there's always a bit, right? And somehow we still have to maintain a direction of flow, and somehow we still have to maintain a strength of flow. And then somehow these things change. The gradients change and the charges change. And so this is all based on relationships and your point of reference. And that determines how much synergy you develop and what is the susceptibility of getting this energy. So all of that allows you to transcend the various energy levels within the ranges, whether these ranges are physical, emotional, or spiritual. right? Because see, the thing is that as we start to go to the outer extremes, where we're leaving the old science behind, because the old science was really based on verification and validation by man-made means. But how can you verify and validate things that you can't see? Or how can you verify and validate things that you can't verify and validate? Well, with a man-made product, you can verify and validate it other ways, but science does not accept that. And so we find that these straight lines do tend to curve. And that's what we've been talking about the last couple of weeks. And so now we understand how all of us can link up together. And in fact, the chains link up together. And now we know that there are different ways to do this and at different speeds to do this. And what speed is it? Well, the speed is the speed of light. And all of us in our unknowing want to get back to the greater oneness, unknowing really what it is or how to explain it, and where the science and the spirituality have failed to explain it, and it hasn't been clear. But what is clear is that we do have a brain, and this brain is made up of the same components as our bones. But interesting about the brain is that it is surrounded by bones. So as far as our brain is concerned, the bones go around it. As far as our body is concerned, the bones go in the middle of it. And so when we look at the x-rays, we can see the bones, but it's hard to see the other matter. It's all kind of fuzzy. And then on the area in between the brain and the bones is an area that we call the supragranular layer. And that supragranular layer keeps the soul inside. And this is composed of 3 rows of cells. Only 3 rows. So let's get into the arena of life here and try and decide who's the player and who is being played, right? We say, well, life is a carnival or life is a circus. Well, who are the clowns and who are the suckers? Well, why don't you all step right up and remember to tell the universe to shut up, because we know better, don't we? So if we want to see this arena of life, we have to get inside. So that's the first decision that we have to make. Are we on the outside or are we on the inside? And as you can see, we have different areas within the arena where we can sit down. And the difference between these places is that they cost more. And this cost is based on preference. So we want to be closer to the action. Well, then we have to pay more. But, you know, there's an anomaly here is because we have sections where, like in the red section, all the seats in the red section cost the same amount. But we could say, well, the difference between row A and row B, there's no difference really, you know, like big deal. It's not really going to change the way you view the game. And the difference between row B and row C, well, that's not a big deal, right? That's not going to change. But the difference between row B and row C is a lot smaller than the difference between row A and row C. So, you know, maybe we'd like to jump over the rows if the usher's not looking. But that just keeps you within the same section, right? So we understand that there are connections between the outside field and the inside field. And we know that there's some kind of connection. We call that the Gansev connection. So what is this against connection and how does it work. So if we look at the green seats, they are of a different price. And they have the same relationships between rows A, B, and C. And the 3 rows there are the same price, and the 3 rows in the red section are the same price. But there's a difference in price between the green and the red section. So if you were going to jump over just one row, the best row to jump over would be the first row of the green section and the last row of the A section. In other words, jump from row C to row A. Row C in the greens to row A in the reds. Yeah, that would be cool. Not only would you be one row closer, but you'd save some money. Well, let's just carry on and get down to the action, shall we? Because right down at the action is where all the players are. And there is another boundary. And if we get as close as possible to the action, we would be in the front row. And if we do the same thing that we did by going from row C in the greens to row A in the reds, if we did the same thing and just jumped one row, we would become participants. We would go from being observers to being participants. That's a huge difference. And it's just one row. So this whole structure here is okay in physicality because, as you can see, the seats are arranged in circles, and these circles make rings around the center arena where the participants are. So every other ring of rows is where the attendance is, all the observers. And you, as a paying customer, pay to be an observer. And of course, as a participant, you get paid to participate. So that's another huge difference, right? But the thing is, this is a contrived deal, isn't it? Because why are we playing these games? So for entertainment, right? And it's a contrived thing because the rows are circular. So we find that really, if we take the relationship of the circle, we can get this circle based on the diameter, but there's a fudge factor, right? We can't really finish off that circle. We can have 3.14 times the diameter plus a bit, right? Plus a fudge factor, because pi is an irrational number, which means it's an endless number. It goes somewhere. I don't know. Boston. I don't know. Pick a city. Pick a planet. Pick somewhere in space, you see, because space has energy paths. And in relationship to Earth, the energy always comes in, goes out, goes around, or just carries right on through, like an X-ray. And this is based on magnetical forces of repulsion, which are emission, or gravitational forces of attraction, which are absorption. And the range is between the crust and the magnetosphere. And depending on where you are is your susceptibility. But hold on, there's more. There's obviously beyond the magnetosphere, and we can see it. So if we can see it, that's a physicality. And if that's a physicality, then we are only dealing with inner space. So what we have is our earth space, and we have our inner space. And when we compare the two, and we find that we can see that in our Earth space, we have different colors. But the key is that all of these colors of light travel at the same speed. So speed is not the factor. The difference in the color of light is not determined by speed. It's determined by frequency. And the frequency is the number of times that light rotates. And so what we see, we don't see the rotation, we see the wave. That's why we measure the wavelength. And so the wavelength is a physical measurement of the frequency, which is a physical measurement. And so that's in the physics. But, once we get past the rainbow, we can't see. Well, we can't see light. There's nothing there. Space is kind of empty. And so just because we can't see that light, but we can see the space. So there is something going on there, but it's not inert space. So it's an inner space. And what we can't see at all is the outer space. So fundamentally, when two forces come together, the PM ticks come together and they do a little dance and they create the X and Y axis. And in order to maintain this energy and to maintain this form, they have to create a rotating field. And the more PM ticks that come in, the stronger the field. And so we seem to think that the Z axis, which is the field strength, is made up of circles. And it's not. It's not made up of circles. It's made up of spirals. So fundamentally, when we say, well, two forces come together, they're coming with the same charge. And because they are the same charge, they repel. And because they repel, these forces will deflect each other. And depending on which direction they deflect will determine the rotation. But it doesn't matter. What matters is that they repel and deflect. And so you have this curvature. And so we see this in the universe. But the thing is, don't look at just two dimensions. You have to look at, well, not two dimensions. You have to look at three dimensions. But three dimensions go both ways. And so you see, when the two forces come together, there's an explosion on another dimension. Why? Because the energy has to go somewhere. You can't just bring energy in and not have it go somewhere. And if, in this picture, the left side is equal to the right side, well, then it can't go that way. And if the top and the bottom is equal, well, then it can't go that way either. But if the front and the back, wait a second, they're also equal, well, it can't go that way either. Okay, so what determines it to go somewhere? So when we look at phospholipids, and we discussed this a few weeks ago, what we saw was that the phospholipids encapsulate the cells, all of our cells, all 70 trillion cells in our body. Each of them is encapsulated with phospholipids. And so the outside, if we look at the cell as an arena, the outside has a larger perimeter than the inside. So therefore, there's a curvature. And as such, there's a convergence of energy coming into the cell, right? And so we see that the energy somehow is going from the outside to the inside. But clearly, that cell has a position. And so the energy is going out from the cell. So, in other words, there's a two-way street. The energy from the cell is going out, But to replace that energy, there's energy coming in. And where's it going? It's going right into the core, right? So this is how we don't see what's going on. In fact, we don't see the cells in the x-rays, but we do see them in the somatoscope that was invented or used by Gaston Masons, which, as you know, is illegal. So it's bad enough if seeing is believing, and then if seeing is illegal, well, it makes it harder to believe, doesn't it? So somehow the energy is coming in and going out, and that energy is based on a code, and that code is based on a relationship of our DNA, which is in a spiral formation, and it interacts with our RNA, which is in a spiral formation. And what is interesting, of course, is that there's a contribution of the RNA to the DNA, and then there's a feedback from the mRNA to the DNA. And so then there's a progression of a single strand DNA to a double strand DNA. So there's two strands. And this is how phosphorylation is done. So the energy is coming from our brain into our heart and feeding our body. And the feedback is coming from our heart and feeding back to our brain. And it has to cross over what they call a blood-brain barrier. Well, how does it do that? There's got to be an interaction point. So if there's two sides to the equation, then maybe the two sides of the DNA strands are working together. And in order to maintain that field strength, if the DNA is the x-axis, the RNA is the y-axis, then the rotating field would be the z-axis. And if one hemisphere interacts with the other hemisphere, then there has to be something in between. And I was referring to this as the eddy currents. You all know about eddy currents. You see when a boat goes through the water and you look at the waves behind, and then you find on the perimeter of the waves, the boundary between the path of the boat and the rest of the water, it creates eddy currents. And these eddy currents are turning in such a way to allow the boat to travel through the water. Well, these eddy currents are also allowing for the connection between the two hemispheres. And so this is exactly how the Earth operates, because we see that the northern hemisphere rotates in the opposite direction of the southern hemisphere. And if you have this thing rotating in opposite direction, there has to be some kind of, shall we say, lubricating force in between to eliminate that friction. And what we see is actually the physical manifestation of the Earth rotating once a day, rotates all the way around. 365 days, it rotates all the way around the sun. Oh, okay. And so when we're looking to space technology, we find that we have fields. We have an interaction of fields. We know that we have rays of light, and we know that we have interactions of these rays of lights. So there has to be some kind of lubrication between these fields. Let's go back to the very beginning when we were talking about surface to volume ratios. So when we look at a straight line, like in two dimensions, it's easy to tell the polarity of the straight line, right? Based on surface to volume ratios, the ends of the line are negative and the center part of the line is positive. And if we put a bend in the line, we change the surface to volume ratio. And on that basis, we create another negative charge, a third negative charge. And if we create a third on the one side, then we create a third positive on the other side. And so this balances out the three negatives and the three positives. But because of the imbalance, and you can see there's an imbalance because the hydrogen is on the outside and the oxygen is on the inside, kind of like the arena. And so when we look at the arena and we see that we can go around the field of play, then we see that the curves have the same characteristic. They're negative on the outside and positive on the inside. Everywhere. So if we're just looking at a section of a curve, and that's what we do when we look at the flux lines that follow the surface of the Earth. These flux lines go right round the Earth. And we walk through these flux lines. In fact, everything that we have on this planet that sits on the planet is sitting in flux lines. Excuse me. Ships travel through flux lines. Airplanes travel through flux lines. I wonder if souls travel through flux lines. And what we find that if we draw a tangent, which is a flat line touching the curvature of the Earth, and from that point where it touches, we draw a perpendicular 90 degrees. And then we take a stone and we grab it and we pull it up. We find that these flux lines are seeking density. And so when we lift this stone, we are literally lifting the flux lines. And so we put tension on them. But we think that these flux lines are circular, and they're not. These flux lines go right around the Earth via this stone, via you who picked up the stone. And what I'm trying to demonstrate on the picture here, if you follow the red mark on the right-hand side and let it go all the way around the Earth, it won't come back to the same level. It'll come back one row down. And then if that row goes around and it comes to a green marker, and if that goes around the Earth, it'll come all the way back one row down. And then that green marker goes around and comes to a light blue marker, goes around the Earth and comes to the left side, but one row down. And that goes to the dark blue marker, goes all the way around the Earth, and comes one row down. And that row goes into the Earth. This is why satellites, every time they go around in orbit around the Earth, they come a little bit closer. Because they don't go around in a circle, they come one level down, whatever that level is. Depends on the environment, depends on a lot of things. It also depends on the density, but it also depends on the positioning. So if you lift this rock, the tension on these flux lines is going to pull back to the Earth. So you can let this rock fall and make sure you remove your toes so that you don't crush your toes, because it's going to come down pretty hard. But if this rock was out towards the magnetosphere, it wouldn't come down in that fashion. It would, in fact, go around. provided you put it in orbit. If you don't put it in orbit, in other words, if you go perpendicular to the tangent line straight up, yeah, well, you're going to come straight back down, right? Because you haven't engaged into the orbit. So could you take a rock and get it into orbit around the Earth? I don't think anyone here is strong enough to do that. So you cannot get it into orbit around the Earth. And you know that because airplanes to fly around the Earth need jet engines. And the stronger the jet engine, the higher they can go. Why? Because these flux lines are pulling it back down to Earth. So you need to keep the jet engines going to keep her from coming back down. But once it gets into the orbit, you can turn the engines off. But just know that it's always going to come one level down with every orbit. So what does that mean? Well, if we're looking at the Earth, it's not a two-dimensional thing. And we see the curves, right? So if there's two sides, unlike the Earth, which has two hemispheres, here we have two sides of the same thing. And so the curvature is negative. It's negative on the top and negative on the bottom. And so something's in between. And so if we put, say, something in there like this, and we have the X, Y, and Z dimension, and they're all in balance, and they're all circles. Well, there's no energy there, is there? It's invisible. So this is not the way it works. This would be more representative. In other words, the outside is magnetical, the center is gravitational. The outside is negative, the center is positive. And as the field rotates around, it moves. So one lap around moves it to the next line. And then when it goes around, it moves to the next line. So there's kind of a motion there. So when we look at in book number 3, and we look at how force fields are unwinding, and we could see the different positionings. So in the center is the core, and in the outside is the magnetical. But the relationship changes because it's a spiral. And doesn't that make sense? One, the DNA and the RNA are made the same way. We just celebrated a new year. And what that means is the Earth went around the sun 365 days. But it didn't come to the same spot in space. It only came back to the same spot in relationship to the sun. So the Earth and the sun in the course of 1 year moved. And so where we are today, although it's 1 year later, we're not where we were 1 year ago. And it's not going to be 1 year from now. It's going to be at a different level. But if we go around the sun 3 times, then a magic thing happens when we go around the 4th time, because we find that never is the orbit complete. There's another fudge factor, and we call that a leap year. So scientifically, the Earth goes around 365 days a year, but and a little bit, right? So that's another fudge factor. And we're not accounting for that. So I wonder, when we're talking about Trinity components, which is the X, Y, and Z dimension of the plasma structure, then is there only one crossover? Or would there be 3 crossovers? And the reason for this is because when we look at the X, Y, and Z dimension, we are none of those 3 dimensions. And when we take 3 amino acids and add it to a 4th one, that chain folds over and creates protein. And when the Earth goes around the sun 3 times and adds that to the 4th time, the 4th time is a leap year. So something happens on that 4th dimension, which we all have to fudge. And we know this is a problem because when we look at growth, we see a snail. We see a snail developing like a cornucopia. In other words, it starts small in the center and grows. And it grows in a spiral. But the thing is that the snail lives in the center. So the way it grows its shell is in a rotating field. So not only does it grow in the X and the Y axis, but the Z axis gets bigger. So energy is coming in, going around, and then because it's being contained, that field is growing in strength. And you can see the lines on the snail. And the thing about these lines, they are not circles. They go around in a spiral. And then when you look at the conch shell on the left-hand side, not only does that shell grow in a spiral, but the spiky parts on top of it grow perpendicular to one field. And that field has as X, Y, and Z axis. So that's an X, Y, and Z axis on top of another X, Y, and Z axis. So we have different ways to grow things. And so if we look at our brain, and our brain has a supragranular layer around it, which is three layers. And these cells are not like any cells that you have in your body. These are unique. These compose of the supragranular layer. And they are not circules. They are spirals. And so each of these 3 layers interacts with the other layer at a different field strength. And so we find that the 3 dimensions that we have in the 3 layers of the supragranular layers, we have an x-axis, and it's negative. And if it's negative, it's magnetical. We have a y-axis, and it too is negative. And if it's negative, it's magnetical. Well, wait a second. If I have the x-axis and the y-axis and they're both magnetical, what's gravitational? Well, of course, the z-axis. It's positive. It's gravitational, right? And which way are we going? Well, I don't know, right? We have to figure out, are we trying to verify and validate our existence? Or are we trying to figure out what is our point of existence? So if we verify and validate, then we only look at the x and the y-axis. But if we want to see the true field strength, then we have to look at the transmutation of energy. And with that, you can't be seeking confirmation. The confirmation is that you were born. you're alive. You were born to Earth, not born to Mars, you see. And so when you look at the horizon, which is your transmission, and you look at from the ground to the sky, which is your transition, something happens in there which causes a transmutation. And is the transmutation the fudge factor? Well, if we go back to the 129 Tesla experiment, and then we look at the meter there, and we see the readings on the meter, we have 3 readings which represent the X, Y, and Z axis. And the Z axis is showing 92 Tesla. So if there wasn't a reactor there, it would be showing 1 Tesla, because that's what the planet is. So this is 92 Tesla. But the X and the Y axis have a number. And when we did this magnetical creation, the X and Y axis stayed the same, but the Z axis pumped up to 129 Tesla. So the X axis stayed the same. It's negative, so therefore it's magnetical. The Y axis stayed the same, so it's negative and it's magnetical. But the Z axis gained an awful lot of energy, so it was positive, and it's gravitational. And through that gravitational field, it jumped up to 129 Tesla. So you cannot absorb this energy and have the X, Y, and Z axis not change. It's not possible. Something has to change. So the X remained the same, the Y remained the same, the Z changed. And what caused the change is none of these 3 dimensions. So when we look at the ray creation, and we see that the neutron at some point gathers enough energy to decide to split and produce an electron-proton combination, plus it releases PM ticks. So the PM ticks are none of those 3 dimensions. But the PM ticks are a plasmatic matter. In other words, they are a matter jet. And the component of the PM ticks are present in each dimension, are present in the x-axis, they are present in the y-axis, and they are present in the z-axis, and they are present in the plasma matter. And we know that because when we look at the cups of life, we got zinc GANs, copper GANs, carbon dioxide GANs, calcium carbonate GANs, we got amino acid, and we got more water. And where did all that come from? So that's why we call it the cups of life. And so when we look at the curvature of the earth and we see what's going on there, we find that the magnetosphere is negative and the gravitational is positive, and that there is an area there that's kind of in between. So one of the areas that's kind of in between is our emotion. So I'd like a cherry pie. So I have an emotion to go get a cherry pie because my emotion says that I would like that. that was a good cherry pie. My emotion says, I ate the cherry pie. And I was right. I didn't like it. Well, wait a second. These are both emotions, but they're different. You see, one is before and one is after the fact. And the crossover point on that is our emotion of presence. So in the emotion of presence, I either want a cherry pie or I ate a cherry pie. And so whatever that presence is an interaction between the fields of the sun and the earth. So the sun has a plasmatic condition. The earth has a plasmatic condition. And we are the independent variable or the product from the one sun and the one earth. We are more than two. And then we have an emotion of our mind, and we have an emotion of our body. And the emotion of presence is 1 + 1 is more than 2. So we are the third in that equation. But that's the field. That's the field artifact of the other two fields. And we are none of those three fields. So we are the receivers of this energy. And this energy then is spacebound energy. And that spacebound energy includes earthbound. The earthbound energy and the inner space is all part of the space. It's all the same. But depending on our field strength, we are in the physical state or in the plasma state. And depending on the connection, which in our physical state has a boundary of a supergranular layer, which has this magnificence where it can be a plasmagen receiver. In other words, plasma energy from outer space. And then from there, that we can interpret what we see. And that's why seeing is believing. But we focused on all of that in terms of our education because we only talked about what we saw. We didn't talk about what we were going to understand. And it is from our understanding that we have knowing. We know that we were born, so we know that there was a before. And so we introduced the carbogen, the aminogen, and the plasmagen because they're on the other side of the watershed. This is where the new science is going, and we are only in the part of knowing. We don't know all the details. We have to fudge things. We have things that hold us back. So we discussed the new atomic mass. When we looked at the mass of the electron and the proton, and we suggested that it equals the mass of the neutron, well, not quite. There's a fudge factor. Well, that fudge factor turns out to be the totality of the energy balance and positioning, because you take into account the proton mass plus the electron mass. Well, that's a given, but you have to add the mass of the p-entics plus the total mass of the matter, antimatter, and the dark band. So if we were to review all the fudge factors that we've talked about, we find that on the periodic table, the neutron math works plus a fudge factor. We find that the relationship between the diameter and the radius of a circle and the perimeter of a circle is a relationship with pi plus a fudge factor. When we look at our time and we relate it to how we rotate around the sun, we see that we do that every year, plus a fudge factor. So there's something that we're not taking into account. And so is this supragranular layer, these 3 layers of cells that surround the corpus callosum, is that a fudge factor? Or is that just a medium? Are the PM ticks the fudge factor? If ray motion is the creation, in other words, when a neutron is split up into an electron and a proton, it has to have enough energy to do that. It cannot do that if it doesn't have enough energy. So it has to absorb more energy, and therefore that becomes the product of natural creation. But if it's decaying, in other words, reducing in energy, in other words, coming into physicality, it has to drop down in energy. So it's possible for the neutron to break down into an electron and a proton plus the PM ticks. And so whether it's creation or whether it's decay, it is all creation. And the byproduct is a PM tick. So this is what, another fudge factor? What's the difference between creation and decay? So this is why when you make the GANTs and you see how much power the GANTs has, where does that power come from? And it is not stationary, right? Energy is always in motion because you know that. There's a hole in your GANTs. And when you look inside, you say, well, there's nothing there. Well, is there a soul in that hole, right? So when we talk about the science and the science of mass, mass is related to the mass of the maggrav. And that mass encompasses your light energy, your emotional energy, your spirit, and your soul. But that mass interacts with the inertia of the environment. And so that focus point is your point of transcendence. And so before that is your dream state, your ascendance, your aminogen state. After it is your post-amino acid stage. You've created amino acid. You're awake. You've descended. So these are all representative of a transitory field strength as you cut the flux lines between here and there. And so our point of view has always been earthbound, where the earth is gravitational. But the thing is, our soul is gravitational. So our point of view has always been upside down. And our soul is in a physical body on this planet soul, which is represented by the physicality of the planet. And there's an emotional connection. And so this is where the new teaching is going, because what we're talking about in plasma science is how energy moves. It moves in packs, energy packs, and it has different flavors, which gives us the spice of life. And it's the basis of our indomitable spirit. It comes in bursts of energy we call soul packs. And so the soul sequencing that we have in terms of being born is where the soul of the sun plus the soul of the earth attracts the soul of the man. And then the soul of the earth, which is the physical residue, and the soul of the man attracts the soul of the body. And then the soul of the earth, which is the physical residue, and the soul of the body, which is the physical residue, manifest the physicality of the body. So this whole business of getting back to normal is really what it's all about. We are offering vision enhancement units for the American military who are suffering from PTSD. And these will enhance their souls and their spirits and bring some balance to their life so that they can fulfill their purpose. We all do need to be connected. We all need to figure out what to connect to. And then we all need to know how to open up these cages. And that's where this is all going. So we understand that there's a plasmagen state and there are other plasma states. And these are all different kinds of energy. And they transcend the limitations of science. And it's a very, very important subject because there's a basic rule. The higher strength feeds the weaker strength. And so it all breaks down to understanding the components of plasma science, where we start with the PM ticks and we finish with the field interaction, which is the interaction of our plasma fields with the inertia of this planet. There's nothing wrong with it being man-made. It's the role of man in making things man-made that needs to be addressed. So when we do things in a certain way, where we bind the energy, we bind it into a coil, bind it into a spiral, tight, 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 that's our self-serving ways. And the reason it gets tight is because we're constantly taking and never giving. And so we're always taking at the expense of others. So they have less. This is abuse. This is abuse. And morality is the missing ingredient. And those who think there are no consequences, they are wrong. That's an eternal burden. This is what we're talking about when we talk about the ethics. The ethics involves morality, compassion, and courage, among other things. It's a way of life. It's the way the universe works, and it's well organized. So ethics all has to do with behavior and the universal laws. And it's a way of knowing that is the common denominator. And so that brings us comforts. And these are moral comforts. Because how can I be comfortable if you're not comfortable? Or am I comfortable at your expense? Well, I know that you're not comfortable, and that's a violation of my morals. And so we sometimes tend to throw mental weeds, mental tumbleweeds at people, but they have no effect. What we really need to do is to understand how to do the dynamic transfer of energy into our physical destination state. We need target practice. And so the Universal Cup is representative of that. And so we see that through our supragranular layer that we can open up to new dimensions. And so we find that your soul, the soul of the man, which is the essential you, is the interaction between that plasmagen state and the mattergen state. And the soul of the body, well, that's the surrogate you. And that's the interaction between the plasmagen state and the environment state, which is the small m matter state. Question. Is the supragranular layer also the boundary to all the cells? The thing is that it seems that the supragranular layer is exclusive to our species. So we need better target practice. And this will help us with our emotional transformation. And now we can perhaps better understand how the peace dome is created, right? Because the peace dome goes right around the world. And every time it goes around the world, it gets stronger. It gets more gravitational. So please keep doing the peace dome. That's how we can bring our plasmagen state and elevate it. That's the difference between the earth space and the outer space. That's how we get fed. We get fed from the universal energy. It's a plasma feeding. And this is our dream ship. But it doesn't just go into our dreams, it goes beyond our dreams. We have lots of places to go. And we know this because of the connections. May not have been there, but we know that there are connections. And that's what we're learning, how to cross the bridge of knowing. And so we find that all of us have a super granular layer. And when we all link up, we can do this right around the planet. And not only that, but you see, this connection is done contiguously because it connects to the universal community as well. So it extends beyond. It extends beyond the super granular layer. This is what we mean by knowing by connection, because the Universal Council is trying to connect to the universal community. And that's what we're trying to do. So now we better understand what manifestation is. Manifestation is our perception of the Stacker unit or the universal reality. And it starts basically with two fields coming together to form another. And so the formation of any new field is a manifestation. And always the plasma feeding leads to this manifestation. So this manifestation can be non-tangible or tangible, non-visible or visible, plasmatic or physical. And therefore, if it's dark matter, it could also be light matter. And so there is a plasmatic reality and a physical reality. Whatever reality it is a form artifact of the manifestation. And that includes your emotion of presence. Your emotion of presence is also a form artifact. And all of it has to do with energy and motion. And so what we need to do is to go through an emotional transformation and see that it works the same in all field strengths. And so as we're trying to get on the other side of the bridge, we say, yeah, this is advanced knowing, but remember, we are only in the basic advanced knowing. We still have a lot of emotional baggage that we have to transform. And the most important thing is in the plasma science, we're calling all Earth patriots, and they're both near and far. They are on Earth, and they are in the universal community as well. World Peace Treaty is important for all of us to sign. And to completing the world peace will bring physical and emotional transformation. Remember, arms sales conflict with peace negotiations. Morality itself is not a fudge factor. The plasma science needs to be delivered in exchange for peace on Earth. Welcome to the new space age. Thank you for flying with the Keshe Foundation Spaceship Institute. I hope you enjoyed this lesson. That's the end of the lesson. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Alex. You need a moment to warm your tea or your toes?
Yes, please.
Okay. Maybe someone has a question. Are there any new people here today? I don't think there are. I was just looking through the list here, and I think everyone's been here before. Although our group is expanding slightly, someone told me it's mostly bots for some reason, and then we were trying to get the link working again. I don't know, Ed, if you're here, have you checked that? Ed's here. If that link is still working, he may not be close to his microphone. But the super, go ahead.
The link, as I told you, it works for some and it doesn't work for others. And I haven't discerned, nobody knows really why yet.
Okay, maybe we can send a message to Azar. She can get it working. I don't think I have that ability. But we have grown. It's getting feedback. Okay. But we have grown slightly. Oh, someone has their mic open. They must be listening on speakers. That's usually what happens when you don't have a headset on and you're trying to interact with just speakers. It comes through and then feeds back. But anyway, this super granular layer, has Mr. Kesh used another term for it, Alex? I was just thinking of the blood circulating the brain, and as we go to sleep, this magnetic field gets a little weaker, and this allows the soul to expand its fields. Has he used another term for this granular layer, super granular layer you're talking about? I don't think I've heard him mention it before.
Well, again, the last time I checked the Wikipedia, they keep changing definitions over there willy-nilly. But these are the 3 cells. This is a layer that's 3 cells thick that surrounds the brain, and it's unique to humans. And so what it does is it allows us to expand our understanding and our connections. So the reason this has now come up is because what we're trying to figure out is if we have the soul in the cage, how do we open that cage? And that cage literally is the supragranular layer. So I guess the answer to your question is it's the cage.
We heard if the cage.
Yeah, it's the cage. That was the answer.
Okay, I thought you said if the cage. It's the cage.
Yes, yes.
And I was thinking when Mr. Kesh talks about enrichment of materials and that we need this enrichment of materials to travel into deep space. So I was thinking, obviously, the unit is going to actually physically fly. And of course, as we know with the thorium reactor car, you wouldn't have to refuel it for 50 years. I thought this was all great because now we have fuel to travel in deep space without refueling it, but again, moving the unit. And now I'm thinking, when you enrich some of these materials, he said, if we don't have the purity we need, we'd end up in a different place in a different dimension. So they must be part of this flight unit in a way, these enriched materials that create some sort of fields that allow us to move and to different dimensions and different positions and to return. But there's no physical fuel. Like when they launch rockets, I think they're using like oxygen and hydrazine or something as the fuel. And I was thinking the enriched materials would give us, we weren't going to be burning anything, but there'd be some sort of interaction to propel the craft, but we're not really propelling the craft anymore, as I understand it. I don't think the craft is going to physically move.
Yeah, yes, it is, Mark. It is going
Okay.
to physically move because you have to have that field strength wherever you're going. The what you have to understand is that we are radioactive, and so the nuclear reactors are radioactive. And we have found from our involvement at Fukushima that though we were terrified from the World War II and the dropping of the nuclear bombs on Hiroshima, was the half-life decay that would go between 20,000 and 50,000 years, and we can drop that down to a matter of days. And we did that. So it isn't the nuclear energy that's the problem. It's knowing how to exchange energy and how to do this on a plasmatic basis. So we ourselves are nuclear reactors. So literally when we die, we release the equivalent of 18 Hiroshima bombs in terms of energy. So there's a massive amount of energy that's within our bodies. So the point is that bananas are also radioactive. Okay, so if you take a Geiger counter to a banana, you will see that it's radioactive. So the radioactivity is energy that's in motion and is part of life. And it needs to be used properly. And the way it's used properly is through its purity. And what happens? You're not able to get 100% purity, right? You're able to get 99.999% purity. So it's pure, but there's a fudge factor. And this is the curvature of space. So we find that in order to transcend these different dimensions, there has to be a crossover point, right? Between here and there.
So these materials are going to be part of this flight system, I would imagine, because he said we needed to travel into deep space, but I can't take you with a spacesuit or anything like that.
We are part of the process. See, when you travel in an airplane, a commercial airplane or a ship, you're a passenger and you're passive. When you go in the spaceship, you are both a participant and an observer. You are not only inside the arena, you are the arena. And you are the show.
Right, but the ship itself, I just have this thinking that it's not going to move. Just the way when you sleep, your physicality does not move, but yet your soul travels across the universe by expansion.
Yeah, but you can do that during your sleep period. But if you're leaving and going to Mars, what are you going to do? You're going to leave your body in bed all that time?
Well, if you're traveling with the soul and you decide that's the position and you feel happy there, then you can download yourself there. The soul, based on the inertia and its senses, that it can then turn into whatever that field strength allows it to turn into if you need to go into some physical dimension.
See, this is what's so beautiful about this conversation. Once you have the basics, then you can talk about this in an intelligent way and ask intelligent questions. And that's where the success comes in as we cross the bridge of knowing. We don't know all these answers. These are all in the advanced research.
Oh, I know. There's a whole new level or cycle of teaching. He said we have to be taught how to use these systems in a way.
And me, I'm in uncharted territory. All right. So you're following me. And, if if I take a wrong turn, you're gonna follow me that way.
Well, I'm not following you that closely. You're
Just
way ahead. So if you make a mistake, I won't go that far. Ed, I see your mic is open. Did you want to come in here?
Yes, I just wanted to say, I wanted to go back to your question about the enriched uranium,
Fuels,
the
space
fuel.
fuels. Yeah.
Um, they're not, they need to be 100% enriched, because to travel, especially to different parts of the universe, requires field strength of great magnitude. That's why a percentage of enrichment won't work. We need, but it's not because of the, I actually wouldn't call it radiation. I kind of put radiation into the physicality level. But yet the enriched materials are able to generate the field strength required to match up to the different parts of the universe so that we could travel there. Again, it's not propulsion, but it's magnetic gravitational positioning. And the field strengths have to match in order to attract or repel one another. So that's why we need the enriched materials. They are able to create the field strength of sufficient magnitude strength to be able to travel to different places. Now, as far as traveling on the Earth, I'm not certain we would maybe need that high of a field strength. So maybe we wouldn't need it for travel here on the Earth. But anyway, as far as, our travels in space and the becoming part of the universal family, and that magnitude of travel, they are required. So that's the way I see it. That's the way I understood what he was talking about.
So you see an actual craft of some sort, a spaceship, as far as getting into something and then traveling across, even if it was 1,000 times the speed of light or 100,000 times the speed of light. You see it that way?
I do. I hear what you say as you have been talking about this the last week or so, or a few days or whatever. And I consider that as possible. But the way I see it is that the field that is, the universal body enhancement shells, I think, as Mr. Kesh calls it, these fiberglass units that are egg-shaped, they are just the shells, but the flight systems will be placed in them. And they're working on them in Austria, I believe, is what I heard. And the flight systems will enable a field to be generated that will encompass the unit. Now, the strength of that field as it encompasses the universal enhancement flight unit will determine the position that it's going to go to, because that's how magnetic gravitational positioning works, is at least as I understand it. So the unit itself, in my mind's eye, what I see, especially if we get away from the Earth, that when it does travel, it appears like a light, a sphere of light, because of its interaction with its surrounding environment and the strength that it's coming from and going to. On the Earth, I don't know what it's going to look like. Right. But I know he said that when we go in, we might see a light, which would be our souls encompassing our bodies, our physicality.
Yeah, I think this is what's going to baffle us in a way, because he can create any field strength in any position in these units.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're in that field strength of Saturn or even beyond, would you need to actually go to Saturn? You're already in that field strength and in that environment in a way. So this is the idea of with the soul. Like, I don't think Mitra travels in a ship or the creator travels in a ship. And some
No,
of
and
the
we won't have
UFOs
to
travel with.
We won't have to either once we learn the ability of expanding our soul, the strength of our soul to encompass our physicality. But it appears that using the technology, whether it be the ships or the vertical enhancement units or whatever, will give us a leg up. The experience that we have in using the technology will point out to us the emotion and the feeling of the emotion to get used to and to identify, to enable us to connect with our soul and to to have it so we can learn how to have it encompass our physicality and then travel that way. We wouldn't need a unit at that point.
Right, because I remember a couple of years ago, he said he was canceling the spaceship program. And I guess it was far too dangerous or something in that way. And maybe I misunderstood it. But I thought the spaceship, again, and he said he had to teach the spaceship at first, because if he went to the soul level, we'd all think he was crazy. So because we're so physical, we all wanted something to get into. And this is why he said, I teach you about the spacecraft. But now I think he's moving past that in a way, in so many ways. And just using this sort of dream state, but yet fully conscious. And it's much less dangerous to move that way, as you're already doing it when you go to sleep, but this time you'll be fully aware of your surroundings. And
well, it wouldn't be dangerous using the universal body enhancement unit either, because it would be using magnetic gravitational positioning, and they're compared to the way we travel now.
Oh yeah, agree.
There would be no danger, because the fields don't even if they do touch, they keep their integrity, so to speak. He said, but normally they just don't. When they get close to one another, they go around each other because of the repulsion. The different field strengths.
Yes, the shielding. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes, and I think John thinks that as well, that we will be, most of us, traveling that way with the physical craft, and then down the road, some of us or many of us will learn how to move just with the interaction of our energies or our soul and encompassing the physicality at some way. And I know even Jackie said, remember, Jackie, where he said, I can give you something to put near the back of your throat, which would elevate the soul in a way to be able to do this.
Yes, it was a pill.
And that would also, he mentioned about the stopping feeding. Once you had that, you wouldn't need to eat again, or it may last for quite a while after that, where you could just absorb fields. But I'm not sure about the super granular layer. I just thought it was the magnetic fields of the blood encircling the brain and the cranium and the bone structure there. And then as it weakens, it lets the bird out of the cage, or allows it to expand its fields. It's not captured, let's say, anymore. But we have a lot to learn and understand, I'm sure. Anyone else? Yes, please come in.
We don't need to know how to go, but we need to do how it's happened. We don't need to know about how it's happened. There is a different level of understanding, is there? When I fly, I don't see my body, but Ed say he saw his body like a ball of light or something. But I can see everywhere like 360 degree angle, but I don't see my body. And when I fly, that's happened. But I think so. There is something else in the physicality. It's happened, I think so, day by day is gain energy and something build up inside. Yeah, I can match both together, how this happened, but there is something else. Build up in the body.
Yeah.
Something else.
He
Energy.
did
Yeah.
say when he saw the person that was testing the vision enhancement unit that he said within a nanosecond, the soul of physicality and the soul of the man combined together. And the person reported what he was feeling and where he was feeling all these things. But he said that happened so quickly. And then, of course, he's talking about putting the vision enhancement system, if I understand it correctly, inside the flight unit or the enhancement unit. And then he said, do you need a controller? Do you need a steering wheel?
Nothing.
So that's why I
Even
think it's all the interaction of the fields.
Yes. Yes, I feel like that. Yeah.
And wouldn't that be much safer than moving physicality around? We always seem to come back from our dreams sooner or later.
It is not dream.
Right. And then if you get to that point where you feel that that is a position you'd like to test and you can observe what the entities on that planet are doing, maybe you'd like to download or convert using the inertia and the environment to do that. But he even said you wouldn't even have to do that to understand the beauty and the knowledge of that particular place. You wouldn't even have to. You could just absorb it through the soul.
Yes.
So we'll be seeing more and more as the days and weeks go on. As we said, we have the One City project, and then we have these gifts going to the various governments. So there'll be a lot of work being done, and obviously investigation and understanding into these systems. Because he said these are the most advanced systems that have ever been delivered, I think, in the universe.
Yes.
To any civilization. Would anyone else like to bring their understanding in for the rest of us to take from?
Yeah, hello.
Yes, Steph.
Steph. I think it must be physical because he told there's no problem with the traffic or the other planes because it's so high and we don't have, flight units have no problems with, how it called the governments because, it's another heat where they fly and no problems with other planes. That he told, and that means it must be physical.
Yeah, at one point he said we had an issue with slowing them down or something. We had to figure how to slow these systems down. If it was a physical physical movement of the system.
Well, I think both. Maybe many people can do it by their souls, but I think because of what he told, there must be physicals in the air. I just want to tell because I was thinking about it.
And remember, if you go back in some of the private teachings, he said people will be taking the motors out of their cars. So they're probably going to try and develop some of these things and put in some sort of systems or reactors or something, let's say where the wheels or the shock absorbers are. But he said you'll see many of them stuck up in the air, where I guess they got stuck in a way and they couldn't come back down. So
Okay.
he said you'll be seeing many of those. That was, I think, in some of the private teachings.
That's true. That's
Do
true.
you remember that?
No, I wasn't in the private teaching, but good to know, because my car is broken, and then I will wait.
You
I
may not
think-
need it anymore.
I don't
think-
need it to repair, right?
Yes,
sorry.
yes, it's okay. I think our body would be like that too.
Sure, I think too.
It's get lighter. It gets lighter when it happens. So maybe the monk people, they do elevate their body. Maybe it would happen to us too. Maybe later.
Yeah, sure. I think so. I told that.
I feel like that sometimes. Yeah.
That's why he said, I think it's going to baffle you, because he says, I don't transport your physicality, I transport your soul. This is what is going to baffle us in a way till we learn a little bit more of it.
Yeah, and it's more cheaper when you can do it by your own.
But isn't that what the Buddha did when he manifested himself in another location in the blink of an eye, and he took his physicality with him, and in front of 500 people? He crossed the river. I don't know how wide it was, but it was fairly wide, I would imagine. And in the blink of an eye, poof, he's there.
So who was it? Mr. Cash?
No, Buddha.
Buddha?
Yeah.
Buddha.
Yeah.
Okay, yes. Moses, I think too. Yeah, okay. But
some monk people, the Tibetan monk, they can elevate their body.
Right? Yeah, right. The yoga practitioners, gurus.
Yeah.
I know. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's possible, but okay, maybe we are much more nearer than other people, but yeah, maybe some of us will do it, but I think for me it's a long way. But you never know. Every day is different, and every day something happens in the moment.
Right. And then when one learns it and they start teaching the others, I know he said this planet could become depopulated, or half of it, by 2050 may be gone, and they may have to make rules to keep people here. And I don't think everyone is going to have a spaceship unit.
Right.
But they're going to understand how to move around the planet or the universe with their soul, which again is probably much simpler
sure
than we think it is.
Stefania can teach us a bit. She was the nearest in the Mozart project.
She said
Stefania.
She doesn't remember a lot of it, though, or
okay.
She's tried to replicate it, and it hasn't been as easy as it was at that time. Of course, they worked for several months
sure
getting into that position.
But we can do it too when she will remember.
Oh yeah. This is why I think it's the dream state. We all dream. We all have a soul. The soul's expanding, and when you can fully do it consciously, we only remember part of it. And if you wanted to manifest yourself at a certain point in position, that'll be up to you. But I think we'll have opportunity to see what it feels like in these different positions, or where you'll feel comfortable with.
Right.
And then maybe manifest the physicality in that position, maybe. Or maybe just be an observer. I mean, if 1/3 of the people on this planet are not from here, did they fly here, and where did they park their spacecraft? Or maybe they're here and they just disappeared, or did they come in as a soul?
Yeah, but maybe invisible. How many spaceships invisible are in my garden? I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I'm very curious, who one is the first in our chat who said, I was on the Mars?
I didn't catch that. Who was on Mars?
Oh, yeah, the first one from us. Maybe someone will do it next week because he's able to travel with his soul. And I'm curious, who is the first one who in the chat? I have done it.
I don't know. I don't see it there. Maybe I missed it.
No,
But I know he said we'd be able to colonize the moon and Mars without a major problem. So when you think of colonization, you think of the physicality, yeah?
No, Mark, she's saying
yeah,
which one of us is
Yeah.
going to be the first one to go to Mars.
right.
And I'm saying, I don't think it's going to be me, because if I look at Mars and I look at Earth, I think we're in heaven here.
You never know. Have you been there? Or maybe it's
No.
on Venus?
No, I haven't been there, but I know I'd like to send a few people there.
Okay.
I
Okay, maybe
think-
you travel just to another country.
Jacko, he said to get the first Mars coffee. Go ahead, Ed. Your mic is open.
I was just going to say to Alex, maybe Mars doesn't look like it does when we go there, the way we see it here.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. Paradise. Paradise.
It doesn't matter where we live, but wherever we live, we need to be happy. Anywhere. That's it.
Right, and that's why the unit's going to give you that opportunity to sense, well, first of all, to be able to do it, but then to sense where you would like to be. I don't think you'll be forced to go anywhere you don't want to be, but it's where you feel comfortable and where you'd like to manifest. And this cycle just continues. Endless. Well, maybe not endless. As we said earlier, some neutrons only last months or weeks, and some last millions of years. But eventually, even the soul, I think, depletes of its energy. But at another point in time, he said we would live eternally. So again, well, maybe you live eternally by being part of another entity. As with the water fountain, goes up, comes back.
Mark, I have tried to ask a question, but I didn't get the space. May I?
Is it a long question or a short one? If it's a long one, we'll give it to Alex. Short one, maybe one of us can answer it.
Yes.
Go right ahead, dear.
I'll give to all of you who knows to answer. It's the parallel between these three layers of our cell surrounding our brain and the MAGRAPH. Because in the interior of MAGRAPH, between the two coils, we create a barrier. And this barrier is the same like the barrier in our cranian box, which
yes, cranium.
cranian box, which do not allow the soul to go. And so my question is, how we can explain this barrier? How is created this barrier between the two types of fields, gravitational and magnetical? How we create this barrier and how we can get rid of this barrier in order to allow our soul, which is gravitational, to go. Is gravitational and magnetical, because if you are not magnetical, you can't flow. One day, if Jalal is here, he helped me in Romanian group to understand also the relation between deuterium, tritium, and our state of alpha state, gamma state, which are related with these frequencies or this kind of radiation. So in order to fly, we need deuterium and tritium. And this deuterium and tritium are similar to these states of our mind, of these frequencies, like delta, like theta, and alpha. Myself, when I am in alpha, delta, I can fly. And sometimes I see my body, sometimes I do not see my body. And for example, I had problem with this quanta of energy, do you understand, last month. And my wish was to get rid as soon as possible. So I go out from my body. I have seen my electrical body is not electrical, but you know, it was golden. I have seen the imprenta of my body like a golden. And also I got from the universe these lights, violet and golden lights, which help me to balance my MAGRAF, my own MAGRAF. And this light just went there when I had problems, to my nose because I lost my smell, to my throat because I lost my voice. I didn't have the voice like I had before, and to my chest because I had some problem with stomach and breathing. And after this moment, I got back. When I come back on my beta state and gamma state, I got back my smell, and my voice was like before, and I didn't have these problems of chest and stomach. So for me, it was good. It was the way to balance my own MAGRAF by giving the opportunity to my soul to go out, creating this deuterium and tritium, which are similar to our brain waves, this delta, theta, and alpha. So I think that you got my explanation because I received it from our friend Jalal. Maybe he can elaborate more on it. So going back to my question.
Relajado, pues.
How?
Rejalado.
Yes. Jalal is here?
Yes, Jalal is here.
Maybe he can explain and help us. So the connection between our MAGRAF from our brain with these three layers and this MAGRAF, which are created just to understand this process of creating a barrier and of freeing, getting rid of this barrier in order to allow the soul to be free and to travel and to change. If Jalal is here, I will be happy to hear from him if he would like to answer and make this link.
Sure.
Thank you.
Maybe he's just listening, or he can't come to the microphone at the moment. But Mernez, didn't you ask? Mernez, are you here? I thought I saw Mernez in there, but didn't you ask Mr. Kesh a question about moving? And he said to you, well, have you had a dream in the last few days? And you said, yeah. And he said, well, that's how you do it. Maybe you can add more. I might have missed something there. But that seems to me the most logical way, and as far as moving around. He did say we would be safe if we went to the moon or Mars, but once we go into different field strength and different universes, it doesn't work the same way. He said the spacesuit would basically dissolve. It'd open up and then we'd be exposed. Our physicality would be exposed. That's why I'm thinking the soul is the safest way to move.
Yes.
Mernez or Jalal, would you like to come in? And of course, Alex.
Hi, everyone.
Here's Jalal.
Great.
Good evening and good day, everyone. From what I understand, if I understand your long question, you need to understand the behavior of the plasma in the three states of the reality of the plasma. You have the matter state in all conditions, and you have the transition state, and you have the principal state. And all these three is already exist in your body. But unfortunately, all the scientists, all the knowledge in the past, we know only about one and little bit from the second one. And this is the matter state and the soul state. So how are you going to explain all of these in one go? And don't forget, when you speak about alpha and beta, and when you speak about hydrogen, deuterium, tritium, it's all a behavior. And it has a strength. And because we have this gadget to see this plasma in our strength, in this instrument, we explain it and we refer to it to other knowledge. No more, no less. And we give it names. You remember when he's speaking about entry and exit? It's the same condition. We call it give and take. It's the same condition. We give it. We say it plus and minus. We put a lot of names for one thing. This thing repeatedly, it showed itself in the matter state. It showed itself even in the submatter state, and it showed itself in the transition, and it showed itself in the principle. Everyone have its own strength due to the environment that it exists in, or it showed itself in. I hope in this way you need to understand from which perspective, from which Maghreb positioning you are speaking about. Thank you.
Yes, everything within us. Yeah.
Yes, even an atom has a soul. Soul is principal matter, and this soul is a sun, and this sun is in the interior of a black hole. As scientists discover, every atom has a black hole, and so it's formed from principal matter, because inside this black hole we have a sun. And the common denominator of everything is this principal matter, is this soul or black hole, doesn't know the name. And I think that communicating at this soul level, principal matter, we are connected at plasma level with everything in the universe. And if we are connected, we communicate instantly, but we also can instantly to be everywhere because we expand our soul, our principal matter, becoming part of totality and becoming, if we like, and if we desire, becoming entire totality. We expand our soul, and if you are expanded everywhere, so you are at the same time everywhere. You can be on the moon, you can be on planet Mars, on Venus. I have been on Venus.
You know, Salamiya,
Yes.
the human being, because he is long deep in the matter state, he cannot fly, and he will never fly if he do not change this this idea. He always looking for a base to stand on. That's why he always, you know, always try to close the circle that he is unsure about what he's doing and what he's speaking about. We do not let anything open, and this is our problem.
Yeah.
Even with our thoughts, you know, there is even above the principle, and it's not yet open because we are not reached this position yet.
Yes, make sure you close the door when you get in the craft, right?
If there is a door.
Yeah, no, I think that's why he said we're going to be baffled by this. That you're going to have gone to the moon, but you didn't really go there with the physicality. This is the baffling thing I think is going to start to take place.
Yes, is safer way to travel at principal matter level, as we did before, because in all the writings from India, it is written there that we were able all to travel and to fly. And I said, maybe this is mythology, but it's not mythology. In all myths, it is a truth, a reality. And now I became to understand how these yoga people can see the future and the past at once, not in a dreaming state, but like being in our unit, flying unit, or this unit of enhancement. They can be there beside the space and time, where everything is at once, is in plasma level, in reality, I mean, plasma reality in this principal matter
No.
time.
That's why he talks about the two souls traveling across the universe together. I thought he said your soul of physicality will ride the soul of the man across the universe once we learn how to do this properly.
We did before, and we have to remember, just to remember, everything is within us.
So if you move with your soul, what would you need a craft for?
Of course, we do not need, because the soul protects us. He's created from these fields which are very strong, and we are safe everywhere, because it's no difference between the strength and intensity of our soul and the environment from the space. I think so. I don't know if I am correct.
Yes, and just like a light ray, you know, depending on the strength of the principal matter when that light ray was created, determines how far it goes. If the principle was weaker, the light does not go as far. If the principle was stronger when it was created, then it can travel right across the universe without losing any of itself almost, because it matches the field environment that it's traveling into. Therefore, it doesn't lose a lot, and it becomes very slippery, let's say, to move across, because there's nothing it really interacts with, or very little it interacts with, because it can change its outer shell to match the strength level of the environment it's traveling in, so it doesn't even have to interact with it.
And we are created from divine races, and we have the same, we are the image of the soul of the creator, the reflection of the soul of the creator. And I think that also the reflection has some characteristics of the source. We are not creators, but we can create and become co-creators together with the creator, in link, in connection with him. And creator with Mother Mitra, they work together as a masculine and feminine principle, which created us and everything what is in the universe.
Does anyone know, Mr. Keshe said he met with some Buddhist people in China when he was there, and apparently he discussed some of these things with them, and they have a name for the Mekti, but he didn't mention the name, or the promised one. Does anyone know what that name is?
They wait for a new Buddha. Every time they change the Buddha. It's a perpetuum Buddha. I know from our chief of the foundation, she's a Buddhist. I don't remember the name in Chinese.
Okay, I was just wondering, yeah.
Yeah, maybe she's with us? No. She can explain, but usually she's not in North America. Unfortunately, she's busy. Maybe we can ask her Wednesday when we have, no, Thursday. No, when we have a public class with Mr. Keshe. Okay, I talk too much. Now I apologize, but you have to know that I went to Venus, and I didn't went alone. I went with Adrian from Romania. He invited me to go with a spaceship, and we had meeting at 2:00. And I have seen a planet which was orange color, but orange, dark orange. And in my thought was that it is Mars. Mars could be red. But Adriana said to me, no, it's Venus. So I'm not sure what I have seen, Venus or Mars, but I can explain to you that I have seen this, but I didn't land down. I just see the planet from above. And I didn't have the courage maybe or time to land there and to explore the planet. I just seen from above, and it was maybe it was I didn't sleep. I was just in delta or theta state. I never sleep when I am in these states. I also listen what is around me. I can tell people what they said, but also I travel at the soul level. I don't know how it's possible, but
yes. Well, that's what Mr. Keshe said. We're going to have to teach you how to use these systems. It's basically somewhat unfamiliar to us.
Yeah, we can't explain, but all we use it.
Alex, any comments or thoughts on this? More thoughts?
Well, yes, there's a significant difference between the physical and the plasmatic state. I mean, we had a huge breakthrough with the Spanish group. So, you know, it just basically boiled down to, if you have a delta state or alpha state, then you're in physicality. If you see the light, then you're in physicality. So if in terms of the plasma science, I mean, if you're traveling to the moon and it only takes a couple of minutes, I don't think you'll be upset if you don't have a window seat, like a commercial flight. I mean, a commercial airplane flight. But the point being is that the field strength can change. And so if the field strength can change, then it all depends on the environment and the direction of flow. And so if you are on this planet and you are going to change your field strength, maybe you'd be twice the weight, twice the strength. You could do that. I've seen bodybuilders do that, right? They become much stronger because what they're doing is they're taking the energy in. But when we're talking about plasma, we're talking about orders of magnitude. So that's 10 times, you know. So we can be impressed by going from, 0 to 100 in a matter of 4 or 5 seconds. But if we go from 0 to 1,000 in a split second, or from here to the moon in a matter of a minute, that's impressive. And I think that's what we have to realize. So the conclusion really is we are already soul travelers. It's the physicality that is limiting us, and our continual dependence and our continual reference to our physicality. And we just can't release it until we upgrade our morality. Now, that's really what's holding us back, where we lie, cheat, and steal from others. And there's no doubt in my mind, all of us do this because that's the way our society is structured. But, can we break the pattern? Well, yeah, we can, because once we get into the plasma state, we are no longer communicating with our feedback loop, which we get from this self-serving planet. We get it from our plasma feeding loop, which comes through our soul. And that's the point. So there's going to be people going into the spaceship units, and they're going to come out and they will say, well, that was a lot of fun, but they didn't go anywhere. And that is because the morality is not something to be played with. There's a lot of people who want to discount that, don't think it's important. Well, yeah, look at the universe. It's well organized, and the universe is giving. It's benevolent, it's giving, and gives everything that you need. So, and it's unconditional. We have to adopt those characteristics if we want to be space travelers. Over to you, Mark.
Yes, and I'm going to play the new Tomorrow at the end, but isn't this part of the new soul that's being created, where all the created things will be able to move between the dimension of the universe and the dimension of physicality? Is this the new soul? Will it actually be a new soul, or will it be an enlightened soul? Is that the new soul? Ketan, I noticed you put something in the chat. Is there something you wanted to convey here? Was it the name that the Buddhists give to the promised one, perhaps?
You can open that link. It is there.
Okay, I will have to, let me make sure I'm on something. So Alex, I'm going to see if I can open this link and then share the screen, okay? It's something about Wikipedia. And here we go. Okay, let me share what Ketan has put in. Okay. Maitreya is regarded as the future Buddha of this world in Buddhist eschatology. In some Buddhist literature, such as the Antateba Sutra and the Lotus Sutra, the being is referred to as Ajita. According to Buddhist tradition, Maitreya is a bodhisattva who will appear on earth in the future, achieve complete enlightenment, and teach the pure dharmas. I thought it said charms, but it says dharma.
It is dharma.
Dharma. Thank you. According to scriptures, Maitreya will be a successor to the present Buddha, Gautama Buddha, also known as Sakyamuni Buddha. The prophecy of the arrival of Maitreya refers to a time in the future when the Dharma will have been forgotten by most on the terrestrial world. Maitreya has also been employed in a millenarian role by many non-Buddhist religions in the past, such as Theosophy and White Lotus, as well as the modern new religions movements, such as Yigunda. Again, I'm sorry for mixing all these words up. That's the first time I'm seeing them. The name Maitreya is derived from the Sanskrit word Maitri, friendship, which is in turn derived from the noun mitra, friend. The pale from is mentioned in the most of the Buddhist sermons are presented as having been presented in answers to a question or in some other appropriate context. But this sutta has a beginning and ending in which the Buddha is talking to monks about something totally different. This leads scholars to conclude that either the whole sutta is apocryphal or that it has at least been tampered with. Again, okay. Yes, I guess each one, but they'll, Maitreya is a bodhisattva who will appear on earth in the future. Okay. And what does bodhisattva mean? Let's see, I guess you can click on that. In Buddhism, a bodhisattva is any person who is on the path towards Buddhahood or probably towards enlightenment. And that's the path we're on. Thank you for sharing that. Alex, if you'd like to take the screen back, no problem.
Okay, Mark, thank you. Yeah, you no, leave that title page. That's fine.
Okay.
No, you did a really good job reading that, as any American would.
Yeah, right. Who hasn't seen the words before, and they're probably pronounced a little differently, but I think we've gotten the overall understanding in a way. So we're on the path to enlightenment.
Well, yes, but the thing is that all of us are on that path. All of us have the capability. So, you know, this doesn't have an economic distinction or academic distinction. Actually, academic more important, because that's one of the things I had an opportunity to do a little study about the Tibetan culture, and I didn't understand monks again, like as a North American, but what really threw me was the warrior monk, because to me, like a monk was someone who was on the road to enlightenment, And you know, how can you be a warrior monk and be on the road to enlightenment? That's like negotiating peace and selling arms in the back door. But
yes, they have all these drawings, and I've seen some. I've been in a Buddhist temple once, and the lady, she's a monk, and she worked with my sister, and she invited me over there. And yes, they had a big drawing on the wall about all these different beings in space with different weapons in their hand. And I asked her about that. She says, "Oh, when you do something bad, they hit you or something." Maybe I misunderstood her, or maybe that's just in space. But yes, they have a whole tradition with different beings you can see with different swords or other implements in their hand to sort of correct people.
Well, I think the metaphor is not working, but the mental tumbleweed is, you know, very indicative. I mean, like if you don't like something, or you know, you have a feeling towards somebody, you literally send them an emotional charge. And someone who has the capability of seeing auras will actually see that rolling along. But if someone who is ignorant, they won't feel it. Like someone who is really ignorant, you can't even insult them because they're totally unaware, and you know, they feel totally dysfunctional with respect to their consequences. They don't see the connection, and so they're devil may care, and that's exactly what devil may care means. The devil may care only about himself, and that's a self-serving attitude. So we don't need this academic or ritualization. What I was drawing attention to with respect to the Tibetan thing, the whole purpose of the monasteries was for social organization. Let's say someone who requires a welfare. So the monastery would provide food and shelter. The monastery would provide an environment where someone could, in peace, learn and not be a detriment to the society. And so you find that each of these monasteries, depending on the leader, would have a certain kind of vocational affinity. So say one monastery would attract people who are more medically oriented, and others who are more agriculture oriented, and then of course you have others who are warrior oriented. But the whole purpose is to give a purpose and more of a meaning for life. So, but it's really a sanctuary, and so some people just use it as a place, you know, where they can go in and hide, and you know, they tolerate the teachings for the sake of having the sanctuary. So that's really a false notion. So when you compare that to what we're doing here on Sundays, we're all here because we want to be here. And so it becomes important for us as hosts to make sure we provide something that's worthwhile. And that's the pressure to produce. But this is a welcoming. This is something we're all doing, you know, as volunteers. But there is a selfishness that's involved with that. And that is because we all know that our society is very sick and needs a lot of help. And we individually can't do much about that. So we need more power. Well, when we're in the physical state, that is the least amount of power. But we are already in a plasma state. So that's where, you know, we've graduated from, you know, basic terminology, basic understanding, to crossing the bridge of knowing. We don't know everything. We can't possibly know everything. But by knowing the rules of what we have to deal with here, and we knowing of the rules of the universe, and we say, oh, okay, when we look at something the way it is and we say why, that's the answer. Why is the answer. That's why things are the way they are. So what you have to look at is what causes that to be the way it is. That's where the learning comes in. And because we've crossed the bridge and now we're understanding that there is a plasma science and the direction that Mr. Kesh is going, and he goes so much faster than we go here on Sundays, can't keep up with him. But that's not a complaint. That's a good thing because it gives us a target to shoot for. And so some of us want to go faster than others. So although, it's fun to be in the session, going to school is fun, but understand that we are on a mission and this mission is going to change. We came here for a reason, and that is to bring peace on earth. That is the only reason. If you came here to go to the casino in Las Vegas, then you're misguided. You're, how shall we say it? You need ambition. Because, it just boggles my mind, Mark. I'm just going to throw it to you. It boggles my mind. Why would a person who has money go to the casino? What possibly could motivate them to do that? And yet, that's one of the bragging points I see. If you're playing poker with a guy who is wealthy, are you going to bluff him? He doesn't care about money. He has more money than you've ever spent in your life. And you're going to try and bluff him at a poker game? Why is he playing poker? It's a famous golfer, a famous U.S. golfer, Lee Trevino, said, the reporter was asking him because he had just won a golf tournament and he had won $250,000. But to win this tournament, he had to make a putt 2 feet only. It's not even a meter. And they said, there's a lot of pressure, because of the 250,000? Oh no, he says, that's no pressure. He says, pressure is when you have a $20 bet and you only have $10 in your pocket. Now that's pressure. But, why do you put yourself in that kind of position? Because it does stir the emotion. So I have a question. There's a phenomenon that's going on right now in Australia where the top tennis star in the world is being denied access to this tournament, which, it's a tennis tournament. It's like a poker game, right? You only one winner. Everybody's a loser, right? Except the winner. Why are you playing tennis during a pandemic?
Well, because he was going to set a Guinness World Book of Records, I guess, being the most winningest person of the Australia Open, or whatever they call it, the tennis match there. I think he's won so many times, and if he wins one more, he'll break the record of that. That was one of the reasons I understand.
The pandemic is an existential crisis.
In the minds of many, it is.
No, in the minds of everybody it is, because this is a worldwide phenomenon and it's happening right now. This is the North American Corona Telegram team meeting. This is how it started and it's continuing, and it's been over 2 years. So
right, but the knowledge seekers have already gone past it, I think.
Well,
yes, you're being imposed upon, no question.
Well, the news today is I guess it's a 2,400 euro fine in Austria, where they're going to start.
Oh, they lowered it. It was 3,600. But as Mr. Kesh said in the that was Austria, 3,600, I think, a couple of weeks ago. Then they said they delayed it, and now it's down to 2,400. But as
no, it's 2,400 per year.
Yeah. or per quarter or something. But anyway, he said the media and the news is all going out, you know. I think I just played that, or I was going to play a part of that, where he says the media is not going to be where we're going to get our knowledge and information from. So they're on their way out too.
Well, I agree. Don't get me wrong. I wouldn't be here otherwise. But like what I'm saying is, this is the most important thing on the planet today. I don't care. Every time you turn around, it comes to that. If you have a mortgage or you have a family that you have to feed, and right now in Canada, many of these people have crossed that bridge. They have been saying, excuse me.
No problem.
Sorry, Mark.
No, that's fine, Alex.
They have to get the jab or they lose
As long
the job.
as you have your mask on. I don't want you coughing into the mic.
If you don't get the jab, you lose your job.
Right. And if you do, you lose it anyway down the road.
Yeah. And if you lose your job, you lose your home or you lose your family. So, you know, these are tough decisions.
No question. No. But
Okay.
again, you know, you take it and you lose anyway.
Well, yeah. So, and isn't that true in Las Vegas as well? You go to Las Vegas, 90% chance you're going to lose. But if you have money, what other reason would it be to go to Las Vegas? To make more money?
Maybe addiction.
Yeah, exactly. So is that what's important? I'm just saying there's more stuff that's more important, and we all have to make that decision. That's all.
I remember Mr. Kesh talking about a story about some friend, I guess he was in the casino with, and the guy had lost hundreds of thousands of dollars or a very large amount of money. Mr. Kesh said, how could you do this? How could you possibly, you know, in one night? He said, it's no problem. There'll be more in the morning. So I don't know what it is, the idea of winning or just the idea of greed. It probably, maybe, because that's how many people acquire a lot of wealth, is through greed. It never gets satisfied, so they can't stop. But again, yeah, I don't know what the position is, or it's just the thrill of winning, perhaps.
Well, I personally have never been in a position where I didn't have to.
Yeah, I'd like
to. You know, so you know, I'm always looking at the calendar and always looking to pay the bills. I can't just, you know, write the one check and say, you know, all my bills are paid and not worry about that. So we're all in that same boat, and it would be nice to be in that boat. But we have the possibility now of being in that boat and saying, okay, if I don't have to go to work, or if I don't need energy, or if I have my health back, okay, what would I want to do? Would I do the job that I'm doing? Would I even want to be here? So, you know, all these choices again, you know, and I was alluding to a situation that I had when I was young. I knew what I didn't want, okay, because I took all the choices that I was given, and I looked at them and said, no, I don't know. I don't think so. But they said, well, what do you want to be? And I said, well, I don't know. You haven't given me all the choices. You know, so there are more choices. And now we have been inundated with many more choices. Okay, so now what do you want to do? Well, you know, now you can be a space traveler. Well, you know, I'm just, I'm just saying, me personally, I look at Mars and I said, like, who wants to go there? You know, if I want to go to a desolate place, well, you know, I can go to anywhere that's, you know, desolate. You know, it's like wanting to go to visit a slum. It's just, what I'm saying is, there's no attraction, not there. You know, but that's me individually. For someone else, hey, that would be great. I'm living in a hellhole. Going to Mars would be absolutely great. It would be a step up for me. So
Maybe that's why people will be leaving.
yeah, well,
Micah's go ahead, Alex.
Well, what I want to say is we are never making the definitive decision. Like, even like Salamia said, when you go into academia and university and you get a degree and all that stuff, every single professor, when they come to that final question, the answer is always, I don't know. We're still doing research. Well, the nice part about the Keshe Foundation Spaceship Institute is a large number of I don't knows have been thrown in the dumpster. We do know. Understand attraction and repulsion, magnetical, gravitational, and you'll answer your questions. Over to you, Mark.
Yes, Micah has put something in the chat. Would you like to read your question for us, Micah, and your statement that follows it?
Sure.
Could you come a little closer to your mic? You sound far in the distance.
Is that better?
100%.
Okay. I can't help but wonder if we could just get the world leaders and religious leaders into the body enhancement systems, and then they would become instantly peaceful, or would they be afraid to go into them? It is my wish that they will elevate their souls to peace and become one race under the knowledge of the Creator.
Elizabeth says, I am present, Micah, and I am also present, Micah.
That was beautiful. Thank you.
Yes, and I'd love to see this with the jails as well. Rather than getting sentenced to prison for whatever the person has done or planned to do, and that costs probably, depending on where you are in the world, $10,000, $30,000, $50,000 a year to incarcerate someone. Why couldn't a judge be able to say, you can go to prison or you can be processed in the Universal Body Enhancement Spaceship Unit? And Mr. Keshe has said you could take the worst person in the prison, and we've heard stories recently about magrevs being put around or inside the prison. I don't know the exact setup that they use, but why couldn't a person be processed? Maybe they stay in a certain location and they become processed through there, maybe 10 times, 5 times, 25 times, depending what they needed. And then they become a productive member of society. We could be shutting these jails down because they'll know correct behavior after that, and they would become productive rather than putting them in a 6x8 box for 20 years or putting them into a solitary confinement situation, which only makes the problem worse as I see it.
Same thing goes for the mental ward institutions as well.
Yes, we've gotten reports on that from Mr. Keshe about the reduction in people soiling themselves and getting some of their dignity back by just using some of this technology, which I know there'll be a report coming out. I think it was an orphanage actually that was mentioned weeks and weeks ago, but there is some studies going on, I think in Iran to that effect as well. And just like with the Universal Body Enhancement Unit that we saw with the Chinese fellow who was Alzheimer's and Parkinson's for a number of years, he was relegated to the wheelchair. And I would say he's probably lost a good part of his dignity when you have to have someone taking you out of bed, putting you in bed, feeding you, putting you on the toilet and so on. But I think that's one of the most beautiful parts of the enhancement of that person was that he got his dignity back. I mean, he wanted to go to his car so many times, and we know how much, in certain instances, the car means to somebody. Freedom and, being able to operate independently and so on. Of course, he didn't drive on the video, but we just saw that he had that tendency, that he got his dignity back. He was walking very proudly and strongly, you know, and wanted to unlock the car and get in it and drive. And that's another beautiful video you can find on the Keshe Foundation website. Alzheimer's and Parkinson's can be reversed. And of course, restoring the dignity of the man, which is priceless. Of course, recovering from Parkinson's is also priceless. But the dignity of the man, I like that part. And also the people in the jails and in the mental institutions. And many of them may not realize it because they're given so many tablets, they probably just are barely functioning in a way.
Maybe we are looking for the surface problem. We are not getting inside. Why is happening those kinds of stuff? We need to solve the social problem first. And the structure, who made the structure for jail, who make those, and why those in there, and why people do crime.
Yes, I was talking to someone, well, not recently, but a number of years ago, and they were sitting on the courthouse steps and so on. And I started to talk to him, and apparently he violated his probation. And I said, why? You seem like a really intelligent person. I mean, why would you, you know, end up in a gang situation like this? And he said, well, my mother and my father were both gang members. So this is the environment that I grew up in. So he just went along with it, just the way if your parents were Muslim or they were another Christians, you'd probably grow up in that same way of thought. But so I just gave him a little bit of money, and the judge was going to sentence him back to jail. And I just thought of him now for some reason. But yes, this is all entangled in all of this, freeing the man from such abuses.
Same way, we are talking about the spaceship, how we made this one, and how it work, and this and that. But we don't ask the real original question. How can we go that state? So we can be a spaceship. We never ask those kinds of questions. Nobody.
I guess the body is the spaceship.
Yeah. How can it fly? We don't ask that. How can we elevate our soul? We don't talk about that. We don't solve the problem. We just stay in the surface. Right? We need to think deeper.
Say again.
We need to think deeper, and we need to talk deeper.
Oh, I see. Alenka, yes, you're absolutely right. Alenka has her hand up. Please go ahead, Alenka. Your mic is open. Oh, there she comes. I think you're having trouble with your microphone. You did open it. Okay, I'll mute it for you. If you get it working or you want to try again, please feel free. Let's see. Micah says, hi, Mark. Do you have any links to any of the studies you were talking about with the enhancement systems in prison and mental institutions? I have the Alzheimer's and Parkinson's one already. So true about the dignity. That's so beautiful. Right. Mr. Keshe had mentioned that, and that's where I had gotten that from. But yes, I had, and I didn't know I was thinking about that, but he mentioned it. Yes, he's mentioned it over a number of workshops. I don't know if it was in the actual teaching, or sometimes the question and answering can be just as enlightening as the teaching in a way. Some of the questions, they seem to be a little clearer to me than the entire teaching. But yes, both ends are beautiful. And yeah, there's some in there, and there's probably some in other meetings. But again, as certain people say, a lot of this has not been cataloged so that we can actually tap into it like we would like to. Okay, Alenka says, I talk and it seems that it didn't go through. Would you like to try again? Alenka, if you can hear me, would you like to open your mic again?
Oh, yeah.
I think you have it now.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, clearly.
Yes. I wanted to make a comment about the 5 plus 1 or 2 or 3 negotiations.
Right, depending on your point of observation.
Yes, yes. What I see is that I don't think that anybody would expect that the negotiations would be fast, because there are so many interests in that are being affected, that it would not be very easy. But I think that step by step, we have been overcoming the obstacles. So I think that we should be more positive about the negotiations and continue with with a more positive attitude, because we would get more from it. That
yes.
was what I was.
Yes, I think the supreme leader in Iran has already instructed the teams that he wants these. Yes, I think the supreme leader, religious leader in Iran, has asked the Iranian team to wrap up these negotiations. Apparently, he is ready or getting ready to accept the promised one. That's what it sounded like to me. He wanted a fast conclusion to these meetings, as there was an intervention there, and things sort of turned around rather quickly. Mr. Kesh had prepared a dossier.
Yes, but
go right ahead.
But the negotiators have great interests also. The negotiators have many interests from probably given, I don't know, payback from the arms producers. And, but there are ways that can be, that those resistances can be overcome.
Yes, Mr. Kesh said he'll handle the physicality end of it, and it's our job to enlighten the souls. And again, no one fails. So we can all take part in it. That's right. And don't doubt yourself that you're not doing it, because we all have different fields, and what you can enlighten, maybe I don't have, and vice versa. So you may be the one to add that one field that's needed. So feel free to use your soul to enlighten these negotiators and the teams around them.
Yes, thank you.
Elizabeth wants to travel to Austria using Space's flight unit. Very good. I think I'll be going to Africa and visiting Dr. Gatwa very soon as well.
I want to ask a question to Jalal. Jalal is there?
Sure. Jalal, are you with us? He's here as far as I understand, but sometimes he's away from the mic. It is Sunday. I didn't think he'd be working, but he may be, or visiting someone. But yes, let's try, please.
Okay. I'm talking about the Lightened One, the Imam Mahdi, who is coming. What is his understanding about him? What can he tell us about him?
About the promised one?
Yes, Imam Mahdi.
Well, Mr. Kesh said you might, on the 22nd of February, you just might, it might be announced in the One Planet, One Nation, One Race for World Peace meeting. The 22nd of February falls on a Tuesday, so hopefully you can be there, if you could be there, and you can experience it live. But again, it's just a possibility that the Mehdi would announce himself. And someone else said earlier, will he announce himself or will he need someone to announce him? I think he will announce himself. Whether it's at that point in time or right around that time, I would say.
Yeah. But I think the knowledge,
we'll have to see, as Mr. Kesh said, we'll have to see.
Yeah. All-knowing knowledge, like some people say Jesus is coming, but some people say Buddha is coming. Muslim people saying Imam Mahdi is coming. Originally, my feelings is the knowledge. We will see everything. All humanity will see the knowledge. That is the Imam Mahdi, that is the dear, whatever it is. That is the original thing we will see later, maybe.
Jalal, are you with us? Would you like to add anything to that, or anyone else as they see it? Yes, Mr. Kesh has been hinting and then coming out quite directly that he said you've been following the Mehdi long enough in one of the teachings, at least in the American teaching.
Can I just share the screen, Mark, please?
Oh, please, yeah.
This is from Brazil.
What is the meaning? A little bit describe.
Well, this is the peace dome. This is how the peace dome is created. It's not the physical hands around the world. It's the plasma energy around the world.
Yes.
That would elevate us.
Yes. Yeah.
And that plasma energy is the transition point, the transition point between here and there.
Yeah. My thinking is that too. Yeah. Thank you.
Yes, and there's many people here. You can feel free to open your mic. No one's going to criticize you, or you won't lose any pay or anything along that line. So if you'd like to add something, many times it's nice to hear other voices as well.
We are all brothers and sisters, so don't worry.
I saw Mr. Kesh was here for a minute. He snuck in and I guess he snuck back out. He probably had a call or something else. But Jefferson, you're ready to convey something? Thank you.
Hey, hello, Mark. Can you hear me?
Clearly.
Hi, Mark. Hello, everyone. Hello, Alex. This is Jefferson Rodriguez from Brazil. Thank you for the teaching, Alex. I must see it again. Many details that to learn. Thank you very much. But I'd like to bring a point. One thing that I was thinking about this week, I think I asked to Jalal something about, because the next mission of the Keshe Foundation Spaceship Institute, you'll be going to the moon. And one interesting thing is that we talk about everything, every planet, like Mars or Jupiter, Sun, mainly the interaction Sun and Earth, how we are created from the sun rays and the amino acids in the matter state, or the post amino acids, as Alex said, and even aminogen. I'm trying to bring this concept that is easier for us to understand what kind of energy level we are talking about. And one interesting thing is about the moon. The moon is our satellite. And even though the man has gone to the moon, I think twice, and sent many probes, many satellites to study the moon, we almost does not know about the moon itself as a planet, as a matter state, and the correlation that it is got with the sun and the earth in this journey, because of the moon and the position of it's a problem. It's a kind of a relationship with the emotions of the people, the animals, maybe not so much the tides, as Jalal said, but it's got a very interesting effect about the not the physicality, but the emotion. That's one of the fields that we are playing with in the plasmatic state. So that's interesting, because that's the first destination that Mr. Keshe has chosen to be there, or to take us, even with the flight enhancement unit, or through the soul. So I don't know whether someone had some kind of extra knowledge, because I've been reading, studying a little bit about the moon positioning and how it interacts since the ancient time in the mind of the people, and the humor, and how it changes. But we can see a kind of archetype of it actuating through reflection of the sunlight. Maybe it's a very important thing for us to understand. I don't know. I think it is Shweta, in one of the teaching, I think was in the One Planet, One Nation, he was talking about Anahita. That was in correlation to the Mitrite system as well. That was very important. Maybe if she could give us a little bit light about this, I would appreciate very much, because she started to say something about Anahita as an archetype. And that's the thing that I'd like to bring, because for us to understand how would Mr. Keshe make this gravitational position or interacting, and to get away from our planet through the magnetic or gravitational fields and interactions, and go to the moon and be there in that different kind of inertia and atmosphere from that. That was a point that I would like to bring for a reflection, or maybe someone have a better understanding of it. I've been studying, but everything, when you think about plasma fields, is so huge that we can go inside of the moon. Sometimes there is nothing inside there. So it's quite interesting to put the moon inside this game. So that's it, Mark, that I would like to say. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, everybody.
Jefferson. Shweta, are you with us? Would you like to add anything?
Yes, my dear Mark. Thank you, my dear Jefferson. Yes, Anahita, the temple of Mitra in Kermanshah, Iran. Anahita actually means, the meaning of Anahita is the balance, creating the balance in the imbalance, and the imbalance in the balance. That is, we can also say the balance to create the decay, the imbalance to create the decay, and the balance to create the creation. And this is what Anahita means. The perfection in the imperfection, and the imperfection in the perfection. And as energy is in charge, this is always going on. And so there is always an interaction. If there is something is very perfect and going to be stable, like here in our timeline, we entangle in matter, and then we stick to it and accumulate baggage. Then, as about the atomic math, the electron and proton disintegrate, and the PM ticks again travel to interact again. So to find the balance, to find the perfection, becoming the imperfection again. So am I able to, Mark, am I able to explain?
Yes, take as much time as you need.
Oh, okay. Jefferson, thank you. Have you understood what I'm saying? Jefferson, my dear?
Yes. Thank you very much. I'm
yes, of course. It is always, it is always like the mother. I have several children, and she always tries to keep the balance in between the children's, within the children's, and around them. So this is what Mitra, the goddess Anahita, you can say, or the being Anahita, the soul of the creator, or the highest magnitude he want to show, he want to give us to see. So this is what Anahita means, and it is always there. We were always with her, so we were able to come here, Jefferson. This is what we, as a physical being, I will say, in a fortunate position in Keshe Foundation. We are all here in this knowledge, and with the coming, and we are welcoming, in a position of welcoming, and on behalf of humanity, our universal teacher, as my Messiah Shriman M. Kesh has said. We have been in touch with him all the time. So maybe it will not be a surprise, but the universal teacher is here, and he will appear anyhow. So this is what I want to say. Thank you for asking, Jefferson, my dear. Thank you, dear Mark. Thank you so much. Thank you.
And I don't know if it's fact or fiction, but I think there were writings in the ancient times where they said there was no moon in the sky. And I know, and that at one time, apparently we had dropped something on the moon, and they said the moon rang like a bell. And so they were for hours, or I don't know how long, but again, I don't know if these stories are accurate, fiction, or fables, but they said it rang like a bell, thinking that it was perhaps hollow.
Yeah, maybe. Mark, the earth has been manifested in this way, You see the White House, you see the Delhi Parliament, you see the Moscow Parliament. Are these not equally related as we see in the manifestation? So these are made so beautifully, so much beautifully, huge in the dimensions. You can see the dimensions of the architecture. These are not made by we type of people with a chisel and a hammer. These are made by universal beings. They were here. And in that way, we can see they have been created, the moon has been created for some purpose, to have some, at that time, we don't understand now, but we are going to. Maybe there is a purpose. There is a way that we go to the moon, and then we can have the knowledge in a way, in totality, and then go to in a dimensional travel. in the civilization Unicos, we say. So maybe the moon is a space station or kind of space that has been created before, and maybe the universal beings, we can say the ancient beings are there always looking at us, hoping that one day human will understand what is humanity. So this is what in my level, I understand that because of this, the manifestation of Mitra is here, and our universal teacher Sri Mahadi is here, and many other ancient beings, those were always here guiding us somehow, are here now, and we can see them with our own eyes, which has been limited by all those who don't wanted us to get the freedom and see the interdependently loving each other, but feeling the independence. So in the free will. So this is what I think I learned, you know. So thank you, Mark.
Mhm.
Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. I'm sure there's a lot of books that are going to be opened up and a lot of knowledges. It's just like
Yeah,
Mr. Kesh said, if you go to a certain planet and you wanted the bolognese, which is some sort of red sauce, like a spaghetti sauce, a thick one with meat in it, he says you can have the bolognese, but there's nothing on the plate, but you
Yeah.
get the fields of it. And I guess you can
Yes.
enjoy it that way. The same as he
Yes.
said, where I take you to the moon, he said, but you really don't go to the moon. So this is where I'm thinking it's in the fields that you're going to experience the exact same replication inside the unit.
Yes. You know, Mark, there was the epic book Mahabharata here in India is read in religious way, but I don't think it is no way religious, and it is a knowledge, and it is not about Hinduism. So I will say that there was a family that came the start of Adam and Eve, and you can say that, and then they came, and they were women. They appeared from the fire. They are not born. They just appeared from the fire, created by the fire. There were depiction of that, and it is true that from this fire came the woman. From this glacier came the man. You know, like this happened always, but we forgot that. You know, in a way, we always believed in the birth that has been given by a mother painfully, but it has not been at that time. You know. And now we are again manifesting that the birth will be so beautiful that we cannot feel the pain again anymore, or we will not even remember that. As a mother, I can say that. So this is what in the epics when Sita goes down and she asked the land where she was standing to split up, and she just vanished inside the earth. Where she vanished, she was gone to the inner earth, the inner ways, the inner realm of the heart of the soul of the earth. So this is what the way to the other dimension, from the inner to the outer way of dimensions. You know, you cannot go physically in a way, but you can go physically from within. There is a way, always. So this is what I want to say. Thank you, Jefferson. Maybe I'm not so clear because it is very late here, but I know I have gone through many books and all, you know, but you know, we are still detectives. We are in this process, and this is beautiful. And this is as Alex says, what you don't see, try to see that. What you cannot see, there is a thing that to be seen, that needs to be seen. So this is what I want to say. Thank you.
Alex
Thank
says,
you, dear
thank you,
Mark.
Shweta. Very nice
Oh.
teaching. Very clear.
Oh, Alex. Oh, Alex, you're a beautiful teacher. What can I say? We are also thankful to you for welcoming us in the Plasma Traveling Agency. We are travelers indeed. Thank you, dear Alex. So mesmerizing, so joyful, your teaching. And well, what can I say? Without your words are so, I will say, effective in a way that when you say, we just manifest that and just we are standing there in a way. This is the strength of the dynamism you say, every word. Thank you. Thank you. Salam, namaste, salute.
Thank you, Sweta. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, my dear Jefferson. Thank you.
So perhaps this is this new soul of enlightenment that's about to appear on this planet or is here on this planet. And it's affecting all the created things across the universe where all races will be equal, that they'll all understand how to move between these two dimensions. And isn't that what he's saying about these systems? We're going to learn how to move between these two dimensions, where Mitra being the dimension of physicality and your interaction with it, and then of course the dimension of energy or the dimension of the creator or the universe. So all the created souls are going to have this understanding.
Mark, I just want to say it's gives me such incredible pleasure to listen to all the knowledge seekers contribute the way they do today. This is so rewarding, and
agree.
It's absolutely the highlight of the presentation today, and I want to thank you all for being here. I'm going to sign off here because
very well.
It's been an absolutely beautiful afternoon, and I want to thank everyone for attending the North American Corona International Telegram team meeting on behalf of the Keshe Foundation, myself, and Mark. And thank you all for supporting with the Dome of Peace for the very, very heavy load that Mr. Keshe is carrying. And may we elevate him in his efforts as well. Thank you so much.
Yes. And don't lose faith. We're about to turn the corner on this entire chapter. So thank you. I will play the New Tomorrow video. If Mr. Keshe comes in, I'll stop it after that and ask him if he would like to add anything. Otherwise, I'll play the final disclaimer and then the meeting will end. Is there anyone else who wants to add anything else? And feel free. As Alex said, it's beautiful to hear different field strengths, different ideas, different approaches to things, and nobody's wrong. Okay, anything else from anyone else before we end the meeting? And this video is about 6 minutes, but you'll hear about the new soul that's being created. And maybe that new soul is just the total understanding of more of the totality. Perhaps that's the new soul of enlightenment. But we'll all be able to move between these two dimensions. And that's part of the understanding of the totality, as I understand it at this position. So thank you all for being here, Alex and everyone else. Mr. Keshe, thank you for stopping in. I will stop the video at the end if Mr. Keshe comes in and give him an opportunity if he'd like to add anything, or perhaps take some questions, but I know it is late and he's been under quite a bit of multitasking, but isn't that what the Creator does? He's creating new dimensions and new souls in the universe and working with Mitra on top of all the work he's doing here in the physicality, let's say.